Hey, Allison.
Hey Corey.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, you sound great. Are you in the office?
Perfect. Yes, I am.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah,
Well, I
well,
figured we would
just
give people a few minutes to join,
of
but
course. I'm
wanted to make
early. I just
sure.
wanted to make sure everything was working.
Yes.
How's your day been?
It's been good. It's been busy. We went to a career fair at VCU. We talked to some other higher ed people. It's been actually very active for today. So
It
I
is a
suppose
busy day.
yeah, but we're excited to have this conversation. It's all been kind of building
Yeah.
up to this. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
saw you had the Richmond experience took over today. Lots of good content today.
Yes, yeah, she's awesome. Yeah, we were really excited to see all that go through, and it was great. Because we were having a busy day, it was really fun to kind of check in and see, oh, look, something's happening on our Instagram without me even having to do
Yeah.
anything. So
Exactly.
that was really neat and a really great first step in that partnership that we're having. So we're really excited about
That's
that.
fantastic. Glad to
Um,
hear it.
yes, right. There's Beth. Hi, Beth. Just giving people a few minutes. Okey-dokey. Okay. Beth is always a very enthusiastic participant in these types of
Absolutely.
events. Okay, so give it a few more minutes. So how often do you go into the office much at all, or is this the first time? And
No, we're all working remotely, but we try to have one person in the office every day to get packages and make sure no water pipes have exploded and stuff like that. So, we're all on a rotation. I probably come in once every 2 or 3 weeks, but it's just nice to get a change of scenery sometimes. All
yeah,
about
and that's
productivity.
yeah, yeah. Beth and I have liked going into um, the office once a
Yeah.
week or so, just to really feel like we have a place to work.
No, it's so weird.
Beth,
We need to host you.
we have our first question. Beth asks, "I'm shy. Can I network?" I think that's something we'll address
Just wait. You can.
as the event goes on. So I'll give it just a couple more minutes and then I'll
No problem.
get introduced.
And so you guys have a couple more of these lined up over the next few weeks?
Yeah, so we all sort of on the topic of networking. So we have one with Walker Griffey from Or Events talking about what he's been doing with that organization and or company and the networking there. And then also Crystal Dorsey, who works for VCU Career Services and has a lot of really great insight on networking, particularly for minorities
Hmm.
and ways to advocate for yourself and build relationships like that. So, really excited to sort of look at this in a couple of different angles, and
Yeah,
we're
that's great.
um, really just excited and nervous to get started with this.
Yeah, it's good timing too, because once everybody gets past midterms, there's a chance to reset and take a step back.
Exactly, and we're also planning some info sessions on campus, quote unquote, um,
Mhm.
about finding summer internships. So which people are already looking for, which is crazy to think that they could possibly be looking for something 8 months in advance, which is something I never did as a college student. So I'm always very impressed when they have everything lined up by winter break. I was more of a
Get
last minute
it.
person. 3 p.m. Hopefully we'll get some more, but figured I could go ahead and just start introducing, and we'll get
Sounds
rolling
good.
as people continue joining. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Allison. I am the program coordinator for RVA Now, which is a new program of Chamber RVA aimed at connecting students with Richmond and introducing them to what life in Richmond can be and the post-grad opportunities that they can find in this really rapidly evolving region. And we'll be doing that through events like this, through conversations on different professional development topics, as well as info sessions, as I just mentioned with Corey, on campus, as well as connecting them with resources to really show off the best of what Richmond has to offer. And that includes our social channels, this Instagram, a newsletter that we'll be producing over the next coming weeks. Just really making sure we're showing off Richmond to the best of our abilities. So today we have Corey Lane from Elevation Advertising here with us to talk about networking for introverts, which is a topic that is very important to me. Yes, Beth, we are recording live. And I consider myself an introvert. So this, even, doing Instagram live for myself is very intimidating. And thinking about, if I had somebody explaining like, okay, even introverts can enjoy networking, can succeed at these kinds of events, 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been a lot more confident as I had started my job search. And like I said, this is very nerve-wracking for me, but if I can do it, you can too. So like I said, Corey is with Elevation Advertising. He's a senior account manager where he leads business development efforts within the agency's leadership team, also working day-to-day with current clients like us on their blue sky business and marketing challenges. So he's part strategist, part manager. He joined Elevation in 2017 after more than 10 years of experience with agencies like Martin, Wunderman Thompson, FCB, and Ogilvy. He's also an active in a number of community organizations like the Virginia Local Initiative Support Corporation and Leadership Metro Richmond. And we are so happy to have him. We are happy to work with him here at RVA Now. They've done a lot of great work for us, and he's been a real joy to work with. We're really excited for him to talk about this. When he said that he had this presentation about networking for introverts, we were sort of surprised because we don't see him as an introvert ourselves, but we'll be interested to hear what kind of insights he has and how we can talk about it. So the first question I guess we need to answer is, what is an introvert?
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys giving me this opportunity because I am actually, in my heart of hearts, an introvert. When you gave that intro, my background throughout most of my career has been in account management in advertising. So my day-to-day role has been managing client relationships, keeping projects on track. But then it was probably about 6 years ago where I volunteered to start doing business development, which is trying to form new relationships. And I kind of didn't realize it at the time. I was just saying, hey, what can I do to help out our business? And then I realized I kind of accidentally gotten myself into a very extroverted type of position, almost a sales type position. And I was like, crap, what have I done? Like, this is not who I am. I don't like putting myself out there and going out to networking events and things like that. So I had to kind of study, exactly your question, what is an introvert? And is that something that I can work with? I don't want to change who I am in order to be effective at my job. So what can I do to better navigate the way that I'm naturally wired to do this role? So to answer your question, there's a couple misconceptions about what an introvert actually is. A lot of people think that being an introvert is just a personality trait. If you're shy, you're quiet, you're reserved, you're an introvert. If you're bold and you're funny and you're confident, that's more of an extrovert characteristic. But there's actually a lot of research from psychology, from physiological studies, that says that it's not about personality traits as much as it is two things. It's your sensitivity to stimulus, and it's the amount of mental energy that your mind uses to process these things. So introverts are very sensitive to new stimulus, and they also spend a lot of energy absorbing it all and taking it all in. So if you're an introvert and someone invites you to a party, it's not that you don't want to go. You actually do really want to go. You're excited about that. But sometimes just the combination of new people, new faces, a new environment, not having control over your agenda or what's going on for the night can kind of throw you out of whack because your brain is firing on all these different cylinders, trying to process it all at the same time. So you might actually having a great time at the party, but like come 11 o'clock, it's like, okay, I got to go to bed because I've worn down my mental reserves here. Versus someone who is more of an extrovert. And my wife is kind of a classic extrovert. So we have this yin yang thing. but she takes that same stimulus and she doesn't pick up as many of the nuances that I do. But at the same time, she meets all these new people and makes these instant connections and kind of rides that, like almost like an adrenaline rush, where she can go to like 2 or 3 in the morning meeting new people and be the center of the party just like that. And that's just not who I am. It's not my core skill sets. So that's one misconception. It's more about stimulus and mental health. But the other misconception is that it's one or the other, that introverts and extroverts are opposites. The reality is, and again, there's tons of research that has come out to prove this, is that it is a spectrum. That there are definitely situations where naturally extroverted people feel really uncomfortable and start to become more reserved, and vice versa, situations where really introverted people feel like they own the room. I know I have a close circle of friends where, I'm a totally different person. I'm a wacky person, I'm telling lots of jokes, and I'm the loud one in our group, but only in that group. I have to be in that certain circumstance. So just like you said, kind of at the top of the conversation, Allison, it is something that is a skill set. Networking is a skill set, even for an introvert, because we have this ability to flex and start to learn and almost train ourselves the way we would a muscle or any other skill set that we develop. To become more comfortable in these situations without losing sight of who we are.
Yeah, that all sounds very, very familiar to me. Like you were saying about the party and wanting to go to bed at 11. It's like, yeah, I do love to go to parties, but I do need to just do what's the Irish exit? Is that what that's called? When I want to leave without saying,
The
having to
introvert exit, I like to call
go
it.
the whole way. And I surround myself with people who do tend to be extroverts and recharge and really thrive on that energy. So that's definitely something that sounds very, very familiar to me.
Well, and so here's the flip side of that too. Part of all of that processing, it's almost a superpower if you kind of know what it is that you are good at, because we take in a lot of context clues, we read subtext very well, we read nonverbal body language very well, and all of these things that help us connect dots that other people might not necessarily see. It makes us really powerful problem solvers and kind of counterintuitively really good leaders, because we're super strong on empathy as well. So, there's that sort of old trope that, America tends to gravitate towards big personalities and big bold leaders that are center of attention. But there is a lot of space for leaders that are more quiet, more calculated, and more absorbing than kind of setting the chart.
Definitely. And I like that. Yeah. Sort of thinking of different leadership styles. And like you said, empathy is such a big thing. And I think that's a really great way to approach relationships with other people, and relationship building is just.
Is that on my end? Sorry.
Sorry?
Did your audio cut out, or is that on my end?
Might be on your end. Quiet for me.
I can hear you. We're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's all a very great sort of, background of what an introvert is, but what is networking and why is it so scary for introverts?
So networking, then, it's really pretty simple. It's just the idea of cultivating professional relationships. It's basically your business best friends. And one of the first times I ever did a networking for introverts conversation, I got a question from someone. She asked, "Well, do I have to?" And the answer is, her perspective was, can I just roll up my sleeves and put my head down and be good at my job? Isn't that enough for me to be successful in my career? Do I need to be out there like shopping myself around, making all these connections? And the answer is, of course, you can do that. You can just kind of put your head down and be a hard worker. I think one of the risks of that, though, is that you tend to build a bubble around yourself. As I said, introverted people tend to be really creative no matter what profession they're in. And creative people do their best work when they're getting new inputs and fresh perspective. So if you end up being the kind of person who just puts your head down and does what you're supposed to do, you might not be realizing your full potential because you're building walls around yourself. And then on top of that, too, the reality is that no matter what profession you're in, a lot of organizations are very multi-layered and they're driven by social behavior too. They're, unfortunately, for better or for worse, a lot of organizations are political. So it does help to have that network of people around you that makes your presence and your contributions bigger than just the work that you're doing every day. Once again, there are mountains of research that show that the most successful people always have the largest, most active, most robust networks. Whether you're a corporate CEO, a freelance artist, a medical researcher, there is an endless list of benefits to having a network of people. that you can lean on in your career. And just like any relationship, it only gets better over time.
Definitely. And that's, something I had to learn. I wanted to do the same thing. Like, do I have to? Do I have to make all these connections? Do I have to reach out to these people and really talk to these people? Or can I just show off, kind of send my resume and let my cover letter speak for itself. But
Exactly. Well, and
alas.
that's where these two conversations kind of collide. And that's why networking for introverts is so challenging. Because on one hand, yes, we do want to be creative problem solvers. We want to contribute to other people's problems, but we're kind of wired with these really strong in-group and out-group mentalities. There's actually a really interesting study from an evolutionary psychologist that said when introverted people are meeting new people, the parts of their brain where fight or flight is responsible start to light up. So on like an evolutionary level, we as introverts, when we're meeting new people, part of our brain is still saying like, am I in danger here? Like, is this is this a risk for me? There's still that little voice in the back of our head that, back in caveman days where we're still just trying to figure out what our role is. So it takes, and then combine that with our sensitivity to external stimulus and visual cues. Sometimes when we're meeting new people or trying to meet new people, it's just a flood of information, and it becomes tough for us to be good networkers on the spot.
Definitely. Yeah. So more about networking. I think there's definitely different parts of networking that are intimidating for introverts, for everyone, really, and sort of thinking of like what the different types of networking there are and how to approach them as introverts. What would you say like the sort of the major parts of networking are?
Absolutely. In my mind, when I was starting to make more of a concerted effort to grow my personal network, I had three tent poles of what I needed to take a look at. The first and foremost, call it the main tent pole that holds up everything, is mentors.
Mm-hmm.
Mentors are just really crucial. And again, if we're talking about networking and it's just developing professional relationships, all mentoring is one-to-one professional relationships. And there are numerous studies of people that have advanced their careers, really helped answer soul-searching questions just by input of having a mentor. And I always try to encourage people, particularly introverts, to start with three kind of core types of mentors. First, you want to find a mentor that is senior to you. You want to find somebody in your field that has a position that is superior to you, somewhere you want to be one day, because they've done this journey. And they can help you. They provide a lot of context in terms of how they got to where they are today, stumbling blocks along the way, lessons that you can learn. And I think what a lot of people are surprised to hear sometimes is just how willing senior people can be. Because everybody that's achieved what they want to in their personal and professional lives will readily admit that there are dozens of people that help them get there. And oftentimes they want to pay it forward. They want to have that opportunity to help someone else advance their careers too. I've also spoken to a number of senior leaders that spend a lot of time mentoring younger employees and younger peers because they want to know what's going on in the world. They want to know what's going on in their companies. Senior leaders tend to have a lot of yes people around them all day long, and sometimes it's just great to get perspective from someone kind of starting out their careers to see what life is like. So that's one mentor you should have.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the flip side of having sort of a senior type mentor is they are by definition senior. So sometimes when you're reaching out to people or trying to set up conversations with them, I would encourage people just to be very patient, do whatever you can to try to make it easier for them, whether it's meeting somewhere near their office, meeting on sort of off hours, having conversations on off hours, just because they do have a lot of responsibilities. Doesn't mean that they're not interested in talking to you, but it might not be something they're as available as you would hope them to be. So just have patience and be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
The second type of mentor I would always encourage introverts to try to maintain is a peer, someone who is at your level, doing similar things that you are doing. And I always try to encourage you to find someone outside of your organization, if possible, that's at your peer level, because sometimes the benefit of having a peer mentor is that they kind of know what you're going through and can provide that sort of level of empathy and feedback what they do in different circumstances. But the problem if they're in your organization, sometimes that can turn into gossip unintentionally. So if you have a problem with your boss and you're not quite sure what to do, and you go talk to your peer mentor, that starts to get out, and all of a sudden you got a problem with your boss, and there's an issue, and you don't want that. That's an introvert's nightmare. So
Yeah.
I always try to find somebody who's in a similar role as me, but maybe in a different organization that can get sounding board for some of the challenges and questions that I have in my day to day. And the last is really, I call it sort of my outlier. I want to find someone who's in a totally different field than me, that really our only connections, we have shared values, or I find that person interesting. And this person is sort of the fresh perspective role. I want to know what's happening outside the little bubble of my career, my company. I want to know what else is out there in the world. And maybe this is just my perspective as a creative professional, but I always find these mentors to be really inspiring, because they're building things, they're developing solutions to challenges I hadn't even thought of, and that changes my worldview a little bit. Remember, one of our superpowers as introverts is connecting the dots on things. So sometimes these mentors are really, really helpful to solve problems you wouldn't even expect them to. And I would say across the board, whether you're trying to find senior mentors or peer mentors or just your outlier mentors, one of the golden rules is to try to treat those relationships like an investment account. You have to make responsibility deposits before you can ask for a responsibility withdrawal. So if there's something you want from these folks, you have to show that same respect to them.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the ways you make, respect deposits is just being polite, being courteous, showing up on time, listening to what they have to say, being prepared. Just little things that show you're serious about this relationship and you respect their time. You can tell right away from the other side of the table when someone who's asking to be a mentee is just kind of winging it or isn't really totally there. And then that makes me think, well, why did I just waste that hour? So the more that you can just show that you're passionate about this, you appreciate what that person's doing, they are absolutely willing to make connections for you, answer your questions, look at your research, your portfolio, whatever it is that they can do to help make your professional career a little easier.
For sure. Yeah. And that's so interesting, the three types of mentors, because I used to work for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I would interview prospective volunteers. And obviously, as a mentorship agency, we would ask the volunteers, what were some mentors that you've had in your life? And it was always really interesting to hear the different people that they all saw as mentors, whether they were, sort of recent graduates or they were later career professionals. They all had sort of different perceptions of what a mentor is and who they were to them, and sort of thinking about those three types and thinking about examples of, when it was peers, it was really interesting. When it was seniors, it was really interesting. And then when it was an outlier, it was just somebody, like you said, from their life who had shared values with them and really, showed them that way without having, the exact same path as them. So that's something that I've seen resonated, particularly through that work and also through my own life, for sure.
Rule of thumb for mentors is just fewer better. Find the right people that actually are adding value to these conversations. Actually, in a previous time I presented this networking for introverts, one of the questions I got was, well, what do I do if I meet with a mentor and it feels skeevy and it feels, like it's uncomfortable for me? I'm like, good, that's a warning sign, because remember, we had this strong sense of subtext and context. Our gut instincts are very strong. So if you feel like this person is maybe not totally aligned to your values, or isn't maybe going to give you some of the guidance you want, thank them for their time and move along. No one's asking you to get married. So,
right, exactly. Yeah, they don't have to be your mentor for life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's much better just to take the time to find people that are really inspiring to you, that share a lot of your values, and are really returning that respect to you as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very good advice. Yeah, and having that person that you can rely on to really give you good guidance is going to make you feel so much more comfortable and make you feel like you're really you're part of a team, even if it's a little team. So I like that. So you said, networking is the first pillar or mentorship is the first pillar of networking.
Mentorship is number one. And again, that's sort of the 10th pillar, particularly for introverts, because we are much more comfortable in a sort of one-on-one situation. And I think that one of the things that we can do as introverts to make mentorship conversations a little bit easier for us is be prepared. Because we take in a lot of stimulus as introverts, the flip side of that is we're not always great about thinking on our feet. We tend to do critical thinking in isolation. We want to be alone and quiet or in a smaller people to figure out difficult challenges. So sometimes when we meet a mentor who is a new person in a place we might not know, and they're asking really tough questions about our career, it just becomes this sort of tidal wave of information that's going through our brains, and it slows down the processing. So one of the things that I always encourage people to do is just rehearse. I'm not saying you need to memorize something, you don't need to have a script, but driving in the car, getting ready in the shower, just think about the questions you want to ask and the questions that they might ask you. One of the questions I can guarantee any good mentor is going to ask you is, what can I do to help? And you'd be surprised how often that stumps people sometimes. Like, I don't know, I showed up. That's as far as I've gotten. So try to think ahead about what it is you truly want from this person. Maybe not right off the bat, you're not looking for a job offer or anything like that, but maybe it's just to hear a little bit about their story or answer some nagging questions. Should I go to grad school? Or, can I change careers this time? Can I work in something I haven't studied? Just try to see if you can pinpoint what it is exactly that you're trying to get their help on.
Yeah, that's a great, thinking of the questions in advance. People, I mean, I do that for when I would go to interviews, thinking, okay, what are they going to ask me? How would I ask that? And also the age-old question, like, do you have any questions for us, is always the one that that trips so many people up, because they say, okay, well, I'm here for you. Like, I don't think that there's anything like this, that back and forth that you were talking about. There's sort of, you don't expect that to be part of the relationship, but it is. So really prepping, how would you answer questions, and what do you need from them? And if it's, maybe sometimes the answer is like, help me find out how to be mentored, like, I don't know how to get started with this, but just to be ready to ask those questions for sure.
One of the things, as I said, introverts are really strong on the empathy scale. So we have a very easy time of connecting dots and kind of seeing ways to help. I think one time I met with somebody, and this always stands out to me because it was just such a smart move. It's something that a lot of current students or recent grads can do. Is exactly like you're describing, Allison. This person asked me, what are you working on? What is the day like in your life? And I explained to him, I'm working on this new business pitch for an advertising account for a coffee brand. And, it's just been kind of crazy. And then after we met, again, being courteous and respectful, he said the thank you note. Then he also said, I still have access to my student libraries. And I just went in, I spent like 15 minutes, I put a bunch of white papers about the coffee industry's competitive analyses. And I just put it in a zip drive in case there's anything helpful here. And I thought that was brilliant. And I mean, it wasn't anything that we didn't already know, but just that little gesture of, I heard you and I saw a way for me to add value, and I'm going to offer this to you. It meant the world to me. So I still keep in touch with him, and I talk to him from time to time. And you can be damn sure that separated him from other folks that I have mentored in the past too, because I really felt like he was investing in that relationship.
For sure. Yeah. So that's sort of, the one-on-one, which is sometimes easy and sometimes hard for introverts, depending on that. But thinking about like the bigger scale of like the networking events, I think that's where I was always the most.
If mentors are the tent pole, we still have to look at events. And granted, events are weird for everybody right now, but for introverts, it's kind of our time to shine, right? Because most events, just like you said, Allison, to this day, walking into a room with 100 people that I don't know, it's kind of my nightmare. Like, I still get the sweats and the shakes thinking about it a little bit. It's just not who I am. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot easier in a virtual event landscape that most of us are in right now. But events are still crucial to meeting new people, because I think one of the shortcomings of mentors is that it is one-to-one. You're seeking out people that you think you know, and you think you know what you can get from them. Whereas doing events actually opens you up to potential that you might not even be aware of, meeting people that you didn't know existed. So whatever you're studying, there are a number of different groups, whether it's a conference, just networking events put on by folks like the Chamber, community events like Via Walker, things like that. There are lots of different events where you can engage with people. But those can often be really challenging because of that fear of like, how do I, there's a lot of new stimulus coming at me in that space. There's a couple things that you can do as an introvert to really take advantage of events. Well, let me take a step back first. Let's talk about virtual events, because that's what we're all experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Virtual events are well within our comfort zone right now. But it can also be a little bit of a trap, because again, if we're trying to build these professional relationships with people, they're often difficult to do if they're just behind messages and emails all day long. We kind of need that extra push to show that there's a topic someone has raised that we're interested in, a specialist that we want to know more. So it can be too comfortable to stay in the digital space. I'd encourage, if there are folks that you interact with or that catch your eye at a virtual event, to try to find some way to move that conversation. It's almost like in dating apps, right? Like if it's someone you feel like you're clicking with, you want it to move to a phone call or to a coffee or to a Zoom conference or something like that. So try to, if there's a good vibe from people, try to see if you can move it to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would suggest for physical events, when and if those start happening again, is again, preparation. Preparation is really key for introverts when you're going into a new space. Try to look at the agenda, look at the attendee list, who's going to be there, and then set a quota for yourself. The first time I actually had to go to a conference as a business development professional, my boss had told me your job is to make 10 connections. I was able to do it, but going back to the point of depleting mental energy, I was exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually left that conference and went to bed at like 7 o'clock at night and slept for about 12 hours. It was just drained everything I had in me to be outgoing for that long. So set a lower bar for yourself. If you're going to an event, tell yourself, okay, my goal is to meet 2 people. If I meet 2 people, that's great. And then when you have done that, then cool, check your box. You fulfilled your obligation to yourself and just enjoy the event and the space. And then maybe next time that becomes 3 people, next time that becomes 4 people. I'd also suggest maybe if there's something you're particularly interested in and you want to network a little bit, it's totally fine to bring a friend. But I always just be a little bit aware of that sort of pilot fish thing. You know how there's always those fish that follow along with the sharks and never leave their side. Like sometimes when I've gone to events with colleagues or friends, I tend to lock by them because, again, in groups and out groups. That's my in group. This is safety. No one out there is going to kill me. So, but that limits my ability to network at these events. So make a pact you're going to go with someone else that you're going to split for a little bit and then reconvene. That kind of gives you like a safety zone that you can always come back
Right.
to so you don't feel totally.
Yeah, it's like standing by the food table at a party. Like you're going to meet the people who come to you, but you're not going to go out and do that. So that's the friend. Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say, just in terms of navigating events, is just try to know yourself. That sounds a little bit weird, but again, we have very strong subtext and context clue awareness, but we don't always turn that on ourselves. But if you start to read, you start to figure out what the rhythms are for yourself as a person and where you're really comfortable and where you're uncomfortable. So using myself as an example, I'm actually a little bit hard of hearing and my voice is a little bit soft. So I know when I go to networking events at bars at night, I struggle because I feel like I'm yelling. I feel like I can't hear everybody perfectly well. I feel like I'm not making a good impression on people because I'm not fully communicating with other people. So I kind of try to avoid those. Or if there's something I really want to see at one of these nighttime networking events, I'll position myself kind of in a quieter place, or I'll position myself kind of out on a patio or something. I don't deal with that as much. So think about, are you a afternoon meeting person or a morning person? Are you a bar person or a coffee person? And just start to figure out where you're most comfortable and steer yourself towards those opportunities. Or if you're not seeing those networking opportunities, create them. I think when you all talk to Walker, that's a great example of someone who said, I'm not seeing a situation where I'm totally comfortable, so I'm going to create my own.
Definitely. Yeah. And sort of thinking of, playing to your skills, which are different from what people perceive as the best networking skills. You say, okay, now actually I'm going to take the, the networking to me. And that's something that I think right now is different and unique, sort of in this very virtual space. You can set a Zoom call if that's what you're comfortable with, or you can do a phone call or something. Like that's a really great way to say, okay, what am I liking about the space right now? And what have I found to be my strength right now? And how can I take advantage of that? Yeah. Yeah, like this, I've really liked Zoom. I've appreciated that. I like that better than phone call. Because it gives me the comfort of the face-to-face, but also the sort of a little bit being a little bit distanced that way.
That's a really great example of kind of where introverts are winning right now. Because if you think about introverts as being a highly sensitive new stimulus, if you're on a Zoom call, yes, you're talking to someone in a conversation, but you're generally in your home or your workplace, you're at your laptop, you're on your schedule. So that's a great example of some place where introverts can shine
Yes.
It's a little bit more controlled than some of the traditional networking or opportunities.
Yeah.
And
So
speaking
yeah, so we
of
have,
virtual and digital,
there you go. Yeah.
so we've talked about mentors, we've talked about virtual and physical events. Sort of the last tent pole of networking that I always that I had to focus on, and I encourage others to focus on, is what your digital presence is. Because for all the reasons that we've spoken about, digital is kind of a safety zone because we're totally in our element. We don't have to interact too much with foreign stimulus. But it can also be sort of a trap if it becomes just a digital presence. And when I'm talking about digital presence in the networking context, really we're talking about LinkedIn. There are blogs and there are other channels, but really LinkedIn is sort of the main place to be for networking as a professional. But I would encourage people to think about their LinkedIn presence differently than any of their other social media channels. And
Hmm.
I think because you're trying to build a network that you want to tap into. I think when I was just starting out in my career, my instinct was, I'm going to connect with everybody. I'm going to throw out a huge net. I'm going to build all these relationships. And then people will see my network and I will look like a successful person because I have this huge network and the number next to my name shows all these people that I'm connected to. But the problem is when I wanted to, going back to that analogy of like a investment account, when I've made all these deposits and I wanted to withdraw something, I would try to find connections or try to find collaborators or try to find partners or ins at a company. I didn't know who anybody was. I was like, I don't have a personal relationship with people, so I really don't have anything to gain from those relationships. They're essentially just strangers I have a connection. So I encourage people to try to focus on fewer, better contacts on LinkedIn and on social media for professional networking. I actually make it a rule now. If I get an invite from somebody, I try to at least have a conversation with them before I accept their connection because I want to have something to fall back on. I want to have some actual real shared connection. Not
Yeah,
always
and
possible. That's the
that's
goal.
tough. Yeah, and LinkedIn is such a space that it's so baffling once you start it because it's so unlike any of our other social
Yeah,
media channels. And having those conversations with people is like, do I message them? Like, how do I get started with this? How do I take best advantage of this? And
yeah,
it's strange when you're getting started with it for sure.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you raised that question of like, how do I get started? Because, again, one of our superpowers is empathy and being able to read people and make connections. So, one of like the cardinal sins on LinkedIn is just the blind connection, right? It's just someone who says, "Connect with me. I don't know who you are, or
Yeah.
I don't know how we know each other, or what the connection is there." Always add a note, and then because we have these superpowers of empathy and drawing connections, just be honest about what it is that makes it why you want to connect. Hey, I saw you change careers at one point, and that's really interesting. I saw you give a speech of this and loved this part that you said. Just make it very personal and make it very real because that's going to start to separate from other sort of just digital connections that are spaceless.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking of the way that you can really like control what you put out there is really interesting. And sort of in a way, it's kind of like a suit of armor. Like you can say, okay, here's who I am as a professional. I don't have to like go up to you and give my resume. You're seeing it here. And so, how can you make yourself look sort of stand out without even having that conversation with somebody? How do you make yourself stand out as just who you are, your profile, your page? How do you
Yep. So
beat everyone
this
else
is where I
out?
put
Yeah.
this is where I put on my advertising professional hat because there are a couple of ways that you can work within the algorithm. LinkedIn obviously wants to be a platform where people share ideas and people connect with each other. So it's actually designed not for self promotion, but for dialogue. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're putting out blog posts, articles, that's fine. You should do that. You should put any thought leadership out there, anything you're really interested in. But you're actually going to get more traction from weighing in on other people's conversations. So whether it's within your existing network, big thought leader influencers you want to follow, you'll actually get more engagement from those if you actually start a conversation way in on something that's already being discussed. And then particularly from there, that starts to build too. There's lots of other ways that you can kind of help your profile raise to the top. There's also a bias in LinkedIn's algorithm towards freshness. So simple things like updating your profile picture or updating your header photo will help you rise to the top because LinkedIn is reading that you're active on LinkedIn, so they want you to rise to the top.
Hmm.
So little things like that can just kind of help you stand out from the crowd a little bit.
That's very interesting. Thinking of how it notices, even if it's not like something major that you're advertising, it knows that you're active. Um, that's, that's,
Also,
yeah,
I've heard
sorry.
from a number of students too that I thought was really interesting is a lot of self-described introverts are actually very comfortable on video because they can control the message, etc. So posting video is actually one of the most one of the best ways to engage in too. So one of the most wonderful things you can do is if there is a topic you're really interested in, you can just type a quick response to it or just record a short video and just talk through what you're thinking, use visuals, just kind of bring your story to life a little bit. And you'll often find a lot of engagement on that. And that becomes a piece of content that others can then share and play on as well.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't even know that you could record a video as a response to something on LinkedIn. And that's not something that sort of my
Yeah,
introversion would never, never allow myself to do. But
yes, exactly.
that's
And it's
very
even true
interesting.
for introvert.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's actually done a really good job of adding more media options. So you can actually upload full PDFs now. I saw
Hmm.
yesterday a friend who is an author said, "Here's the first 10 pages of my manuscript. What do you think?" And
Wow.
that was a really great way. Think about if you're a medical research student and you're working on a paper for school, just being able to put that out there and say, here's something that I'm working on. I'm interested in my community.
Yeah. Yeah. And doing that without having to like, blind email somebody, I think, even though, emailing is sort of disconnected anyway, it still feels like here I am just shoving this into someone's face, but having people come to you to see what's there and what you can do is a very cool thing, sort of using it to say, here's a showcase, here's me without feeling
Exactly.
like you're
Exactly. And
pushing the
there's
boundaries too
nothing
much.
wrong. Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong with an email introduction to begin with.
Right.
You want
That's
to
true.
deepen that relationship. And the way that we build relationships as people is not via email. We want to have conversations
Hmm.
and demonstrate that we share a lot of the same interests.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that, it's a conversation for another day, really, that we'll want to be talking to students about is, writing that email that you've been putting off or writing that message or making that connection. Like, how do you even get started? Because, you overthink it, you get stuck on the subject line, and then you don't send the email that could make the difference in your career. And so finding ways to, you know, habits to build for doing that and making sure that just like you can do it. No one's going to be appalled that you sent them an email.
Exactly.
And so the digital space is in some ways more intimidating because there are so many more ways to communicate there that you don't really know their response to it. You don't know their tone. It's sort of harder to navigate in that way. But there are so many ways to, like I said earlier, play to your strengths and find out what you're comfortable with and how you can build on that for sure.
And just learn from experience. I mean, that's even a great thing to raise with a mentor. To say, hey, when I reach out to you, is that okay? Sometimes, particularly when reaching out to like senior mentors, you feel the need to want to explain your whole life story. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm studying. This is what I want from you. This is why I reached out to you. But they're senior people. They don't want to read a 3-page email. So sometimes you actually have to work a lot harder to craft that down to something that's more direct. But
Mm-hmm.
that's a great way to say, like, hey, is this your preferred way to communicate? How should I be talking to people at your level?
Yeah. Was the tone of this email polite or was it strange or was it turned off to you? That's a very, once you have that relationship with somebody that you can get feedback and to not be afraid of feedback too is key.
Yes.
That was always something my fear of like even just having my resume looked at. I was like, I don't want someone to see that. That's my, I don't want to hear if it's wrong. But to really not be afraid of getting that feedback and getting that from your peers or um, from the seniors or somebody that you're applying to a job for, like saying, oh, what was it about this interview that stood out to you that got me hired or something, like finding
Exactly.
those things, what are my skills? What do I underestimate about myself? And um, what can I build on for sure? Getting that feedback from mentors is key.
You're nailing it. That's one of the best things because, I mean, like I said, because of our ability to read subtext, we don't always turn that lens on ourselves. So, one of the benefits of having a strong mentor is that ability to have a sounding board based on your work, based on the relationship you build with them. And you can start to have these conversations with yourself, particularly as you start to direct your path. What am I most comfortable and happy in terms of what I'm contributing to my workplace? And then kind of bouncing it off on other people, see if that's how you're actually perceived, if that's the vibe you're giving off. That's a really valuable benefit to having a strong mentor relationship. and also not something you ask on the first conversation, which is why it's better to have an ongoing relationship with folks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you can't sort of start, okay, well, I have a meeting you for the first time. Here's a list of demands that I need from you. Definitely having that. And for them to know you too, for things to say, to know how to give you the feedback and how to really develop you and develop your skills. Definitely.
Exactly.
So we're about at the 40-minute mark. And, I don't want to go too long, but if anybody watching has any questions for Corey or for myself about networking for introverts, about networking, building relationship with mentors, LinkedIn in general, we're happy to answer those. But one thing I did want to bring up with you that you mentioned the other day during a different conversation was a new trend, not necessarily something I recommend, but networking via TikTok was something that surprised me and
Yeah.
love to hear more about.
I'll be honest, also, I'm not sure how I feel about that. That seems to me. I mean, obviously, when you're putting your resume out there and you're trying to apply, you're trying to differentiate. And my instinct is that's probably more of an extrovert tactic.
Yeah.
Tactic, because that's boldly professing what your personality is, what you believe in. It's not something I would recommend either doing or not something I would even look forward to receiving, to be honest. But I will say it is different, right?
It is, yes.
If you have a dozen applicants to a job and one of them has a TikTok that's explaining who they are in their career and shows a little bit of their personality, they'll stand out. But the question is, are they standing out for the right reasons?
Right.
So
yeah.
It's exactly. It's a chicken and egg
kind of thing. But it's always, it's a sign. There's always innovation in these sorts of spaces. It's not always going to be the same thing that you did at a job fair. You don't always just be handing your resume to somebody and shaking their hand. There's always going to be new ways to do it. Some better than others, for sure.
Yeah, and I think the introvert way to stand out is to show that you've listened, to show that you've heard them, to show that you're connecting dots and solving tough problems for them. So I would say that's probably a better approach. Show that you've done your homework when you're applying to a company and see where you can make an immediate contribution. Not that you're really good at costumes and dancing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's something that, as somebody who is applying for jobs in the nonprofit sphere, doing that research was important for me, not only to find out like what the position was or what the organization was, but how could I actually get involved outside of work? Is it somewhere that if I had, been kind of wanting to work, but there wasn't a job available, could I volunteer there first? How can I show that I'm dedicated without having, to create these sort of networking relationships, kind of naturally get in there, and to show that I've done, again, like you said, done the homework.
Yeah, and we didn't even get to talk about volunteering. I mean, that's another great way to meet new people and become more engaged. I think most people kind of do it either from altruism or career development or wanting to help the cause rather than it is sort of a straight up business development kind of thing. But that's another great kind of virtual event or a real event that you can do.
Seeing this comment from Megan that the TikTok networking makes her think of Elwood's video application to Harvard, which is, it's I said it was innovation, but really it's been around for a very long time.
Exactly.
And it worked for her, so I don't know why it wouldn't work like this.
It worked for her, but tapping into my extensive knowledge of Legally Blonde, she had some issues at first. She set a false perspective for herself that she then had to overcome with hard work.
That's true. The
life lessons of Legally Blonde is not a topic that we were counting on talking on.
But that could be a full conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It does bring up kind of the key point to take away from all this, though, is that networking for introverts is not about making you something you're not. It's not about trying to train you to be an extrovert. I mean, you said at the very beginning of the conversation, Allison, that you guys don't see me as an introvert. And that really, my comfort zone is more introverted. I'm actually I've been called an ambivert because I have developed enough of skill sets, enough experience that I'm more comfortable walking into a room with doing a presentation or networking. But just like any other skill, you can do it. You can start to stretch how you fall on that spectrum of introvert and extrovert. Just know where home is for you, where you want to be charged.
Exactly. Yeah. That is exactly. That's a perfect, way to wrap it up, is saying, even if you are very solidly an introvert, you can still take advantage of the skills you do have. Like you said, it is a superpower in some ways, as is being an extrovert in other ways. But you can always, you know, you'll find your path and you'll find what you need to do, even though you feel like you have this limitation, but it really is access to a different set of skills. Yeah. So if no one has any questions right now, we'll say goodbye and hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank everyone who joined us for our first ever Instagram Live conversation. We'll be having some more over the next couple of weeks around the topic of networking and relationship building, and particularly with the lens of doing it right now, something that's intimidating anyway, but currently in this, you know, with the restrictions and the strange atmosphere, it's definitely a different ballgame. So we really appreciate you contributing, Corey. And if anybody has any questions for us after the fact, definitely send us a message and I can pass it on to Corey, and we can hopefully answer that for you. But for now,
I appreciate the opportunity to present with RVA now. So thank you for giving me the forum.
yes, great. Bye everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.